Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
I knew I was late the second I saw the old man. Faded field jacket, trembling hands, hunched over on a bench by the Veterans Memorial like his bones were trying to fold in on themselves. His chest had a scuffed dog tag and a patch that looked like it hadn't been sewn on so much as survived being there. I should have walked right past, should have kept moving like I was supposed to, but I don't move like that. My name is Keaton Hale. I'm 32. A firefighter on leave after a brutal winter run that chewed through half my crew and most of my sleep. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and on my off nights I do street outreach. Not for the points. Just because I can't shake the feeling that some people get lost when nobody's looking, and I've never been okay with that. Quick note. Before we start, share in the comments. How's your day going, and where are you joining from? And let's continue. So that day, I was headed to West Groves. That's the kind of place where the sidewalks look hand-washed, and the mailboxes cost more than rent in my zip code. My fiancée, Raina Ashford, had forwarded me a summons, her word, not mine. Dinner at her father's private estate. Show up clean, sharp, and silent. Her words again. Wear the gray blazer I laid out, she said that morning, tightening my tie like she was cinching a noose. Don't talk about the outreach. Let me do the talking. He's not casual about anything. I wasn't in the mood to argue. Leonard Ashford wasn't a man you met halfway. He was the kind of guy you braced for. Built a market empire in the 90s and disappeared right after the crash, still somehow doubling his wealth behind closed doors. Raina spent the whole week reciting the rules like she was prepping me for a job interview I didn't apply for. I caught the 3:10 train from downtown and figured I'd walk the last stretch from the station to clear my head. Breathe in the oak-lined streets and the quiet like money had a sound. That's when I saw the vet. He didn't ask for cash, didn't hold a sign, just looked up at me with eyes I've seen too many times in too many alleys and said, "Something hot?" And 5 minutes to charge a phone. "Please." I nodded once and ducked into a cafe on the corner. Grabbed a chicken noodle to go, a black coffee, and walked it back over. He tried to wave me off like pride could keep him warm. I pressed the soup into his hands, slid my parka off my back and draped it over his shoulders before he could argue. Then I handed him my backup power bank, the big one I keep for long shifts, and plugged in his flip phone. His hands were shaking so bad the cup rattled against the bench. I didn't ask his story. Didn't need to. I've learned that when a man asks for 5 minutes, you give him 10. I sat down beside him. We didn't talk, just waited while the screen charged up. 6%, 9, 12. He tried to apologize. I shook my head. "I'm good," I said. "You're not going to freeze tonight." That's enough for me. 7 minutes passed, then 2 more. He had trouble sending a text. I told myself I'd wear the cold. I'm built for it. He sipped slowly, like the soup was burning away whatever was left of his chill. I let him be. When the phone showed 15% and his hands had steadied, I stood. "You good now?" He nodded once, slow. "You didn't have to." I gave him a half smile. "Yeah, I did. I checked my watch. Shit." I'd burned real time. I jogged the last quarter mile, boots hitting the paved walk faster with every glance at my watch. Tall hedges, gravel drive, stone walls, and enough cameras to make a prison jealous. The house loomed ahead like it was built to intimidate. At the iron gate, I hit the intercom button, adrenaline starting to churn. I was 14 minutes late. Raina was going to lose her mind. But I owned it in my chest. I didn't leave a cold vet shaking on a bench. That has to be okay with me first. And if it's not okay with Leonard Ashford, that's his problem, not mine. The gates pulled open like a whisper, smooth and slow, and I stepped through as if the driveway might judge the dirt on my boots. The house at the end looked like it had opinions. Gray stone, deep portico, big columns holding up even bigger expectations. Raina stood dead center, arms crossed, one heel tapping the granite like a metronome of pissed off. Her phone was clenched in her hand so tight I half expected it to crack. "You're late!" she snapped. No hello. Just an accusation thrown like it had weight. I checked my watch to keep my answer clean. 14 minutes behind. There was a man freezing by the memorial, I said. Gave him my coat, got him soup, and stayed while his phone charged enough to reach someone. He didn't ask for much. Her face dropped like I'd said I forgot our anniversary. You had one job. Be on time. That was a test. Keaton? I kept my voice low, steady. Then I failed. I'm not leaving someone to freeze for a dinner table audition. She blinked, jaw tightening. You don't get it. My father watches for cracks. He calls that kind of thing a disorganized mind. You show up late and talk about charity work? He'll peg you as unstable. Is that your voice or his? I asked. Her mouth opened and closed once. She looked away. That told me everything. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it halfway out. Text from my captain. Church basement is open tonight. We need blankets and gloves if you've got time. I held the screen just long enough to read, then silenced it and shoved it back in. Not the moment, but damn if it didn't feel like the right heartbeat in a room full of wrong ones. The front door opened before I could say more. The butler, thin guy in a pressed black suit with the kind of smoothness that comes from decades of saying nothing personal, gestured us in without words. He looked at me like I was both expected and inconvenient. Mr. Hale. Miss Ashford. This way, Raina whispered under her breath as we crossed the threshold. Don't bring up the bench. Don't mention your parka. No talk about hero complexes or doing what's right. Just smile and let me handle this. I stopped in the entryway. Not loud, not dramatic. Just enough for her to notice. I'll be respectful, Raina, but I'm not lying about who I am. She blew out a breath like a balloon letting go in slow motion. God, I know. It's just, he doesn't deal in nuance. You either pass or you don't. I nodded once. Not angry, just clear. Then, let's stop pretending this is something I can fake my way through. She didn't argue, just looked at the marble floor like it might offer a better version of tonight. The house was all echo and authority. Big archways, dark wood trim, floors you could skate on. Art that made you wonder if someone got paid too much or not enough. It didn't feel like a place where laughter lived. It felt like a place that issued warnings. The butler led us through a corridor so wide it could have fit a fire engine. Raina walked 2 steps ahead of me, spine straight, hands clamped like she was bracing for impact. I let the silence stretch between us, not out of spite, just because sometimes silence says more than scrambling to fill it. At the end of the hall, just before we reached the dining room, she turned and faced me fully for the first time since I arrived. Look, she said, voice quieter now, like she was trying to hit a softer gear. I know how it sounds, all these rules. But this, tonight, it's more than dinner. It's access. It's showing him I can build something real. I raised an eyebrow. You mean showing him we can? She didn't answer right away. Just looked down at my shoes, probably wishing they were shinier or less scuffed. Then back up, face caught somewhere between apology and calculation. I'm trying, she said, but you walking in late talking about homeless guys and giving away your coat? That's not his world. Then maybe his world's the one that needs adjusting. Don't do that, she snapped. Not in there. Just keep it simple. Nod, smile, don't poke the bear. I bit down on the reply I wanted to give. Something about how I'd walked through fires hotter than her dad's disapproval. But I didn't need to win the hallway. I squared my shoulders. I've walked into burning houses with less hesitation than I felt at that door. But I've never done it in loafers, and a borrowed blazer with a woman beside me, who looked like she was hoping I'd pass for someone else. The butler stepped aside and gestured toward the double doors. They're ready for you. Raina gave me a final once-over, fixed a wrinkle in my collar like that would erase the 14 minutes, and whispered, just follow my lead. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just walked through the door. The door opened like it had been waiting for us, quiet on its hinges, revealing a room too long for its own good. The table inside stretched out like a runway, dark wood polished to a shine. ending in a single place setting under an unlit chandelier that felt like a prop, expensive and unbothered. At the far end, one man sat alone, wearing my parka. I stopped short instinctively. Raina froze beside me. My eyes tracked the scuffed soup cup sitting on a saucer, next to my power bank, still plugged into the wall like it had something left to give. The old man looked up and smiled. Calm, familiar. "Mr. Hale," he said, like we'd done this before. "Thank you for the coat." My chest tightened. That was him. The man from the bench, the one I gave soup, power, and time. Except now he wasn't cold and invisible. Now he was Leonard Ashford, king of this house and this dinner, wearing my parka like it was armor he'd borrowed. I blinked once, quick. The VFW patch, the dog tag, the tired but focused eyes. It all clicked. Raina didn't say a word. Her face went pale, hands clenched so tight her knuckles looked bone white. Her father didn't even glance her way. His attention stayed on me, and I realized then I wasn't being greeted. I was being sized up. He rose with careful motion, not weak, deliberate, like a man who hadn't moved fast in a long time because he didn't have to. He reached out and shook my hand, his grip firm, dry, exact. Then he walked to the side of the table and pulled out 2 chairs, one for him, one for me, next to each other, not at opposite ends. "I thought we'd sit here," he said. "Fewer theatrics." I nodded, still catching up. "Fine with me." But then he added just as calm, "One more choice before we eat. There's an SUV waiting at the side entrance. Inside, there's a man, stranger to you but not to the city, needs a ride to the church shelter on Clemmer Street. My driver can take him, or you can—" I didn't even blink. "I'll take him." Leonard nodded once and pulled a fob from his pocket. "Glove box has the address." He's quiet. Uses a crutch. I didn't wait for more. I turned and walked back down the hall, past the butler who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Out the side door, a black SUV sat idling like it was in on the script. The man in the back seat was hunched forward, jacket too thin, one hand on a wooden crutch and the other on the door handle, like he wasn't sure if it was okay to come in. I opened it for him. "Hop in. Shelter's not far." He didn't ask questions, just said, "Thank you," and folded in slow, like every movement hurt more than he wanted to admit. I drove the 1.5 miles with the heat turned high, windshield fogging at the corners. We didn't talk, but he nodded once before stepping out, and I got out too, helped him check in, made sure they had his name and a bed ready. As I turned to leave, I slipped 2 tens into the donation box by the desk. Back at the house, I walked in through the same side door and made my way to the dining room, slower this time, not because I was nervous, because I understood what the hell was going on. He hadn't staged the bench, but he'd seen what I'd done without knowing who he was, and now I was 24 minutes late to his table, and he hadn't touched a fork. Leonard was still sitting where I left him, hands folded, parka still on his shoulders. He looked up, no surprise on his face, just a small, satisfied nod. "Good," he said. "Now we can eat." The butler reappeared like he'd been waiting just outside the room and began setting the starters. No fuss, no small talk. Raina sat across the table now, not beside me, her face unreadable. She didn't ask what had happened. She didn't need to. Leonard didn't launch into introductions or pleasantries. He just poured himself water, set the bottle back with precision, and turned his chair slightly toward mine. "I wasn't expecting you to say yes," he said. "Then you don't know me," I replied. That made his mouth twitch. Not quite a smile. "I do now." I leaned back, taking him in fully. "You were really out there, weren't you?" "No trick?" "No trick. I took a walk, left the driver behind. Weather turned colder than I expected. Phone died. I sat down to think he tapped the soup cup. And then you showed up." I looked over at Raina, but she still hadn't lifted her eyes. Whatever this was, she hadn't seen it coming. Leonard leaned closer. Most people walk by. You didn't. That told me more than any resume ever could. I wasn't here to be recruited. I was here because I said yes to dinner, but now I could feel it shifting. Like this was less about impressing him and more about who could hold their ground. You could have told me who you were at the bench, I said. And changed what you did? He asked, one eyebrow raised. No, I answered. But I wouldn't have had soup on me. That got the smallest chuckle from him, like a man remembering how to find something funny. You think it's a test? I added. But it's not. It's just what I do. I know, he said, which is why it worked. He pushed a plate toward me. I took it, not because I felt welcome, but because I wasn't going to let the man out-stubborn me. Across the table, Raina finally looked up. Her eyes darted between us like she was waiting for one of us to pull a pin. But no one did. Leonard didn't make toasts, didn't say grace. He just nodded to the butler, who began placing the next course. The silence between us wasn't heavy. It was expectant. As I picked up my fork, he added, calm and quiet, "There'll be another choice later." I didn't ask what it was. I figured I'd know when I saw it. We sat down at that long table like two guys meeting in a burned-out engine bay. No small talk, no wasted motion. Just two sets of eyes knowing the next hour was going to define more than dinner. The butler slid a basket of bread between us, set down 2 glasses of water, and placed a stiff little card in front of my plate. Keaton Hale printed in serif letters, centered and proud like I'd been added to the agenda of something permanent. Leonard didn't butter his bread, didn't sip his water. He just looked at me and asked, "What's the call you still think about?" No warning. No warm-up. I leaned back, just a hair. "Duplex fire off New Bern Avenue last March," I said. 4 units, smoke thick as syrup. Found a kid under a bed in the back corner, quiet as paper. She never made a sound. That's the one that stays with me. He didn't blink. Why that one? Because the loud calls are easy. Sirens, screams, chaos, you react. But the quiet ones, you have to choose to look harder. You have to wonder what you missed every time Raina hadn't touched her water. Her arms were crossed under the table, posture tight like she was trying to hold herself inside her own skin. Leonard tapped the edge of his plate with one finger. How do you make decisions when it's falling apart? I took a breath and let it out slow. 2 in, 2 out. That's the core. Never alone. After that, it's time, air, space. You break the problem down in thirds. You trust your partner, and you move like someone's life depends on you, not hesitating. Because it does. He gave a brief nod. Unreadable. Why do you volunteer? Really, I didn't bother softening it. Because people fall between the hours. Between jobs, homes, appointments, families. They get missed. I can't pretend I don't see it, so I don't. He leaned back a little, like he wasn't expecting that straight of an answer. Raina stayed quiet, eyes low. Shame moves funny. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just folds its hands and waits for someone else to finish being brave before it speaks. Leonard's next question came out like a throwaway, but I could tell he was watching closely. Tell me about a time you drew a line. I didn't hesitate. We had a donor 2 years back. Wanted his name above a veteran's memorial. Big block letters, larger than the ones listing the fallen. Said he'd double the amount if we made it the centerpiece. Leonard raised his eyebrows slightly, like he already knew where this was going. And? I told him no. Said we'd take the money, but the names of the dead come first. If he wanted his ego stroked, he could go buy a stadium. He walked, then circled back a week later and gave the same amount anonymously. That drew the slightest curl at his mouth. Approval without warmth. Boundaries, he said. Good. He paused after that, just long enough to reset the pace, like he was shifting gears. I saw your handle in a volunteer forum last spring, he said casually, but I felt the shift underneath. You posted under Third Watch Raleigh, outreach notes, gear lists, training breakdowns, no photos, no stories that center you, just clean logs. That you? I sat a little straighter. Yeah, that's me. He gave the smallest nod, not praise, confirmation. I've been following your logs for a while. Quietly. That hit me like a backdraft. Not hot, but sudden. You've been watching? I asked. Character shows up in the wild, he said. Not in rooms like this. I wanted to see how you moved when no one was looking. I kept my face neutral, but something in my chest shifted. He hadn't come out to test me. Not fully. He'd already known. I didn't stage the bench, he added. Left the house without a plan. Wanted air. Something simple. Cold caught me and my phone was dead. You showed up? I nodded once. I don't do it for cameras. I know, he said. That's why the camera found you. He finally looked over at Raina. Her face didn't move. She stared at her water like it might give her something to say. The air in the room got tighter, like we were one word away from lighting the whole place. Leonard turned back to me. You know what I'm doing here? I'm starting to, I said. He tilted his head. Go on. You wanted to see if the man your daughter picked could sit across from you and not flinch. Not grovel. Just show up solid. You've already read my words. Now you're checking my spine. He didn't confirm it. He let the point stand. I leaned forward slightly. I don't perform. Not for approval. Not for funding. I do the work because someone has to. He sat with that for a second, then nodded again. Most people want the coin without the weight. Raina finally spoke. Quiet. He never wanted the coin. Leonard didn't look at her, but he heard it. And that was the moment I realized he wasn't testing me anymore. He was testing her too. The question wasn't just whether I'd fold, it was whether she'd stand beside me when I didn't. The butler reappeared and cleared the soup course like nothing in the room was happening. Professional, untouched by emotion, same rhythm as before. Leonard pushed back slightly in his chair, folding his hands. You understand what you've walked into? He said. I think so. No, he replied. You do. That's why this matters. He didn't elaborate. He left it unsaid, and I didn't ask for anything more. Leonard didn't move right away. He let the quiet thicken just enough to settle into my bones, like he wanted me fully inside the room before he played his next card. Then he reached beneath the table, pulled out a single-page brief in a plastic sleeve, and slid it across the linen like he was dealing evidence instead of dinner conversation. Case, he said. Ashford Logistics can win the state's new food distribution contract. 5-year term. But we need to trim costs by 2.3% to beat the competition. Cutting the veteran re-entry apprenticeship would cover it. He didn't look at the paper. He watched me. I didn't flinch. Then you lose the apprenticeship? You don't take the deal. His expression didn't change. That your final answer? It's not a game show. You keep the program. He folded his hands. Where do you make the 2.3? Operations, I said. You consolidate 2 cross docks, Elmhurst and Dunlap, within 60 days. They've both been underutilized since fuel pricing spiked. Combine volume, trim deadhead runs. His fingers tapped once against the edge of the brief. Go on. Renegotiate diesel hedges with fixed floor clauses. You're overexposed to short-term volatility. Lock in a better rate now before the fall surge. That buys you a buffer, still not 2.3. I'm not done. I leaned in, elbows on the table, not to challenge, just to show I had more than talking points. Shift your night crew scheduling. Too many double pays on partials. Rotate crews instead of relying on the same guys padding overtime. You'll get pushback, but you'll also shave 6 figures if you do it clean. He didn't write it down. He didn't have to. Last mile routing, I added. Pilot 3 veteran-owned carriers in under-resourced zones. Give them limited routes to start. You qualify for the small business incentive in the RFP appendix. They buried it in Section 9. No one reads that far. Leonard's jaw flexed. You read the RFP? I gave him a shrug. I didn't walk in here with just my blazer. I read the damn brief before dinner. A flicker crossed his face. Hard to read. Gone as soon as it came. I didn't stop. You're leaking money through paid ghost conferences and vanity consulting reports that never touch ops. Scrap them. No one moves freight from a glossy deck with buzzwords. That's dead weight. He studied the brief. What does that get me? Estimated 1.4% from operations in the first 60 days. The rest, 0.9, comes from procurement cleanup, better hedging, and that incentive stacking I mentioned. You'll hit target before the second quarter ends. And it'll be documented, real, and clean. He steepled his hands like a man halfway through a chess game he might not win. And what do I do with the apprenticeship on the books? Make it a feature, not a cost. Publish the retention data, safety stats, promotion ladders. Frame it as a pipeline investment, not charity. You want me to advertise it? No. I want you to be transparent about its impact. There's a difference. He tipped his chair a fraction, eyes on the ceiling. Trade-offs? Short-term pain and elasticity. You'll lose flexibility on short loads while night shift recalibrates. You'll take heat from managers who've been gaming overtime for bonuses. They'll grumble, "How do you keep them from walking?" You don't. The ones who care about results will stay. The ones who care about padding time will weed themselves out. He looked back at me, no blink, no softness. You want me to start a fight inside my own ops division? I gave a half smile. I want you to run a clean house. Tie bonuses to new efficiency metrics. Make it public. Back it with the board. The good ones will line up. The dead weight will trip over their excuses. Raina shifted in her chair, arms still folded, but her jaw unclenched. She hadn't heard me speak like that before. Not with numbers, not in her father's language. Leonard set both hands flat on the table. You act like this is simple. No, I said. I act like it's doable. If you've got the spine, that got him. Just a flicker, but it was there. He looked down at the page again. The savings targets, auditable. Line by line, you'll get the breakdown, and so will your auditors. He tapped the paper once, sharp like a gavel. This is an answer you can defend. I didn't puff up or thank him. I just nodded. It's just a plan. You still have to do it. He stared at me for another beat, then slid the brief back to his side. Not a dismissal. More like acknowledgement. The butler came in with the next course. Salmon, I think, or maybe trout. But no one moved their fork. We weren't there to eat. Not really. Leonard finally spoke again. You do this kind of work often? Unpaid consulting for the elite? I chuckled once. Only when it keeps people warm or working. He gave a sound that might have been agreement, or approval. Hard to say with a man like him. I turned slightly toward Raina. You okay? She nodded, small. I just didn't know you had all that in your head. I looked at her, not unkind. It's not just in my head. It's in my work. You don't talk to the kind of people I talk to every night and not start asking why the system leaks where it does. Leonard cut in. You think we're the leak? I turned back to him. I think you're the patch or the puncture, depending on what you prioritize. This contract could go either way. So can your legacy. That landed. I could see it in the way he straightened. Slower now, like a man adjusting not for posture, but for weight. He didn't smile, but he didn't argue either. The dessert plates arrived empty. Just white china, polished silver forks beside them, and a silence that felt like the kitchen knew not to fill anything until the air cleared. I didn't reach for mine. Neither did Leonard. Raina sat with her hands folded in her lap like she was keeping them from shaking. She cleared her throat once, not dramatic, just enough to be heard. Then she looked at me. Not past me, not through me. She really looked. I'm sorry, she said. I turned you into a checklist. That's on me. I didn't rush to answer. The truth didn't need speed. No one's perfect, I said. But don't make me hide the parts of me that matter. Her face twisted like the words landed harder than I meant, but she didn't flinch away. I was chasing a grade from him, she said. Her voice was small, but it didn't shake. I thought if I could just bring the right kind of man to this table, he'd finally... She stopped. Then she just shook her head. Never mind. That's not yours to fix, I didn't say I know. She already knew I knew. Leonard leaned forward, elbows on the table, not sharp but deliberate. One more test, Keaton, he said. I want you on our foundation. Full-time, paid well, influence, platform, the works. You'll drop the station outreach. My name opens the doors, your face does the rounds. It was a slick offer. Smooth voice, clean packaging, just enough praise to make it sound noble. And it was a trap. I sat back in my chair and looked him in the eye. I appreciate it, I said, but I'm not dropping my people. I won't let your name become the point. I'll partner. I won't perform. The line sat between us like a border, drawn with ink and fire. Leonard didn't blink, didn't argue. He held my stare for a long beat and gave the smallest nod. Correct answer. Across the table, Raina's breath caught. I watched her watch that exchange like it was something she'd never seen before. A bridge built without yelling, without compromise, without one person folding to survive the other. I turned toward Leonard. If we do anything together, it has to be clean. No photo ops unless they add beds. No donors with strings. No soft rollouts that make noise without helping anybody. He didn't take offense. Didn't push back. He just said, "You'll find I like strings cut." The butler appeared, silent as ever, and placed a small black plate between us. No cake, no tart. Just a dark metal challenge coin, centered and gleaming, like it had been sitting in a drawer waiting for the right moment. The emblem on it was simple. Ashford Foundation in raised letters, a flame and shelter roof stamped beneath. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't ceremonial. Leonard didn't touch it. He didn't explain it either. He left it there like the conversation had set it down for him. Raina leaned back in her chair, exhaling like her lungs had finally been given permission to work again. Her whole frame softened in the shoulders first, then her arms, then her jaw. I hadn't realized how long she'd been holding herself in one piece. Something in me let go too. I didn't say it aloud, but the whole room felt different, less like an exam, more like a contract getting real. Leonard steepled his fingers. You think most people in your line would have turned down the offer? I don't know, I said. I'm not most people. Fair, he said. Then he nodded at the coin. That's not for show. I didn't think it was. You'll find some doors open when that's in your pocket, he added, and some close. I'm good with that. He tapped the table once, sharp and deliberate, like that closed the subject. Raina turned slightly toward me, voice lower now. Do you ever get tired of fighting every system? I looked over at her. Yeah, but I'd be more tired pretending it's all fine. She gave a short laugh, but it wasn't mocking. It was honest. I wouldn't have made it through this dinner without you. You didn't need me to carry you, I said. You just needed to speak without asking what he wanted first. Leonard didn't interrupt. He just kept listening. It was the first time I felt like we were all in the same room, not just seated together, but actually sharing it. The coin sat between us, catching light as the chandelier flickered on for the first time all night. It didn't feel like a prize. It felt like a marker, a flag planted in common ground. Leonard leaned back. You're not what I expected. I grinned. You either. He stood slowly, not out of stiffness, just purpose. The foundation's yours to shape if we do this. You won't answer to handlers. You'll answer to outcomes. That's how it should be. He paused, then looked at Raina. You okay? She looked surprised to be asked. Yeah, she said. I think I'm finally done chasing the grade. Leonard gave a nod. Not sentimental, not soft, just real. The butler returned and reached for the coin, but Leonard stopped him with a hand. Leave it. He turned to me. That's yours if you still want it in the morning. It wasn't a dare. It was an invitation. I looked down at the coin and then back at him. "We'll see how the night goes." He smirked, just a little, then walked out, his chair gliding softly back into place like the room had memorized his exits. Raina stood next. "You want to walk out with me or take a minute?" "I'll walk," I said. She reached for my hand, this time not to lead me anywhere, just to hold on. The sound of the dining room door creaking open wasn't loud, but it was sharp, intentional, the kind of sound that came with timing. A man in a navy suit stood halfway inside the threshold, one hand on the brass handle like he was still deciding if this room was worth stepping into. His eyes flicked across the space, landing on the challenge coin, then on Leonard, then, finally, on me. Dorian Pike. I'd hear his name later. Boardroom operator, quiet assassin type. The guy brought in when the margins got thin and the vision got too sentimental. The one who knew which ropes to cut and how to make it look like strategy, not damage. Leonard didn't move much, just lifted 2 fingers in a lazy, confident gesture. An invitation that wasn't warm, but definite. Pike stepped fully in, shoes silent on the wood. He walked like he owned something he hadn't earned. His eyes dragged over my parka still draped over the chair. He didn't look impressed. "We can't afford a Boy Scout," Pike said to Leonard, like I wasn't sitting there. "Margins are tight." I didn't wait for Leonard to reply. "You can't afford a scandal either," I said. "Cutting a veteran apprenticeship to win a contract isn't lean strategy. It's cowardice with a calculator." Pike turned his full attention to me. "You're not hired." "I know," I said. "You're still welcome at the table." That didn't land the way I think he expected. His mouth twitched. Not quite anger, not quite confusion. Like the system he was used to, where pressure made people retreat, had failed to engage. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I felt it before I heard it. Quick, specific rhythm. I pulled it out and glanced. Warehouse fire, warehouse district. Multiple units en route. Second alarm activated. I didn't stand. I didn't shift. I turned the screen toward Leonard so he'd know why my eyes had flicked away from the moment. "You need to go?" he asked, voice low, steady. "No," I said. "They've got it." I tilted the screen so he could see the extra alarms already on the move. "I'm present." He nodded once. Respect, nothing performative. Pike, on the other hand, was trying to recalibrate. He shifted tactics. "Would you be willing to speak on a public panel tomorrow?" Pike asked, voice suddenly smooth, faux-friendly. "We're launching a public-facing push, leadership with heart. Would mean a lot coming from someone like you." I didn't smile. "If the numbers are honest, if the apprentices aren't window dressing, if what you're selling actually feeds people, and not just your next quarterly review, I'll speak. And if not, then I'll pass," I said. "You'll survive without my soundbite." Pike looked like a man chewing something bitter. His jaw moved once, slow and tight. Leonard didn't interrupt. He just watched Pike process a no that hadn't even raised my pulse. There was a pause long enough to feel deliberate. The carafe in front of Pike tilted just slightly. Condensation ran down the side and pooled at the base. A single drop broke free and traced the linen in silence. Pike turned toward Leonard. "We need a unified message before Monday." Investors are asking questions. Leonard didn't answer. He just held Pike's stare until the man looked away first. Then Pike left. No handshake, no smile. Just a pivot and a clean exit like he thought speed could undo weight. The door clicked shut behind him. Leonard didn't speak right away. He reached for the carafe Pike had ignored, poured 2 glasses, one for himself, one for me, and slid mine across the table. "You didn't blink," he said. I took the water and drank. Not my first fire. Raina, still quiet, leaned forward, resting her arms on the edge of the table. "That's who they listen to?" "That guy?" Leonard exhaled through his nose. "Pike's useful when you need numbers fast. Dangerous when you think speed equals clarity." She looked between us. "And now?" Leonard took a long sip of water. Now I let him make his report, let the board chew on it. Then we move without asking for permission. That made me grin a little. You're used to being the quiet one in the room, aren't you? Power doesn't need volume, he said. It needs timing. I nodded once. That I could respect. The air in the room had changed again. Not lighter, not warmer, just sharper, like something important had been declared without needing to be spoken out loud. I set my water down and pushed the challenge coin an inch forward on the table. If I'm going to work with you, foundation or not, it has to stay like this. Clean, direct. No handlers running interference, no polished nonsense. Leonard looked at the coin, then at me. I'm offering you leverage, not leash. Good, I said. Because I don't leash well? Raina gave a small sound. Not quite a laugh, but something close. Like she was finally breathing through her own filters. Leonard leaned back, folding his hands again. What happens when the next pike tries to charm you? I won't embarrass you, I said, but I won't sell you a version of me that doesn't hold up. He gave the smallest nod again. Almost approving. Almost. Then he stood. No grand statements, no dramatic exit. Just a man who'd gotten the measure he came for and decided it was enough for tonight. He paused at the door. We'll see how honest the numbers really are, he said without looking back. He stepped into the hall for a moment. And then he was gone. Leonard hadn't followed Pike out. After a beat, he stepped back in and sat in the same chair, but the quiet had changed shape. His hands came together in front of his mouth, fingers steepled. The move didn't feel rehearsed, just heavy with whatever was next. I saw your name a year ago, he said, voice low, steady. Shelter grant application through a regional partner. You asked for $18,000, cots, lockers, a mobile shower trailer. I braced. That number had lived in my head for months. We didn't get it. We'd stretched, hustled, begged second-hand gear, and cleaned it like new. I waited for the lecture, maybe some commentary on amateur budgets or overreaching mission creep, but he just said, "We didn't fund it." We watched. I let that sit for half a breath before answering. Figured. We made do. Church lot off Lincoln, borrowed a trailer from a plumbing co-op, volunteers who weren't afraid of bleach and freezing hands. He studied me. Not like he was judging, more like he was finally finishing a puzzle he'd been staring at too long. What's the ask now? He said. Winterization fund, I replied. 10 extra beds, a case manager who won't burn out, and supplies that won't mold in the back closet. Clean books, 6-month milestones. Outcome reports we'll post publicly. He nodded slowly, absorbing every line like it mattered to him where the dollars landed. Condition, he said. You keep the outreach yours. My name stays small that landed clean. Deal, I said. You'll get receipts, not selfies. He looked satisfied. The kind of satisfaction that comes from not having to say good. He'd just let the agreement settle between us, like it had always been meant to happen. Then he surprised me. One more thing, he said, and his voice dropped out of the command tone into something that almost brushed against personal. Bring Raina once a month, not as my daughter. As herself, I looked at her. She met my eyes and didn't flinch. There was something soft in her face I hadn't seen all night. Not weak, just real. She gave a small nod. Shy, almost relieved, like someone had finally stopped grading her and started inviting her. I think she can handle that, I said. I think so too, Leonard said. He reached under the edge of the table and pulled out a small, folded note. Plain white paper, creased once down the middle. No envelope, no monogram. He slid it under my parka like he'd been holding onto it since the moment I walked in. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. Whatever it said could wait. The butler drifted back in, hovering near the far wall like he'd been waiting for a signal. But none came. No announcement. No formal close to the night. Just 4 people sitting at a long, polished table in a house that suddenly felt less like a museum and more like something with breathing room. Trust wasn't declared. It just showed up and sat down without being asked. Leonard stood, finally, and gave a small nod that wasn't dismissal, wasn't command, just understanding. He walked out without saying goodbye, and for the first time all night, it felt like we weren't performing anymore, just showing up. We stepped out under the portico, the cold wrapping around me fast. It caught my arms bare, sharp where my parka used to be. But I didn't reach for the truck. I didn't rush. That bite in the air didn't bother me anymore. Not after the night we'd just walked through. Raina came up beside me, quiet at first. Then her hand slipped into mine, not guiding me, not pulling me anywhere, just holding it, palm warm and solid. "I'm sorry for the porch," she said. Her voice was small, but clear. "I was scared. I made you my shield." I didn't squeeze her hand tighter, didn't rush to smooth it over. "We're partners," I told her. "That means name the fear without handing me your script." She let out a short laugh, more breath than sound. "I've been auditioning for him since I was 12, she said. "Every Sunday dinner, every Christmas trip, every time I got a promotion." "I get it," I said. "But I'm not going to live that way. I'm not performing for a place at the table." She nodded, eyes still on the gravel drive. "I know." And I could tell this time she meant it. We stood there a second longer, letting the cold do its thing while everything else inside us started to settle. The house behind us didn't feel like a threat anymore, just a place with stone walls and old rules, some of which we'd just bent. "We set a plan," I said, still holding her hand. "I'm keeping the station and the outreach. You come down when it's not a photo day. No optics, just real time. I want that," she said. "I want to show up where it counts." And we talked to Leonard. "Not around him, not about him, deal," she said. "But I get to tell him when he's being an ass." "That's your birthright," I said. She grinned and squeezed my hand. "I picked you because you don't bend that way." I looked over at her. The porch light hit her face just enough to bring out the warmth in her skin, the pink in her cheeks from the wind. She didn't look like someone trying to pass a test anymore. She looked like a person again, not a checklist. We walked toward the truck, gravel crunching under our steps. No tension in the air, no pressure, just the sound of leaving something behind and not regretting it. I opened the door and paused, remembering the note. Slid my hand into the inside fold of my parka and pulled out the small piece of paper Leonard had tucked there earlier. It wasn't long, just a folded sheet of printer paper, nothing formal. I opened it and read the handwriting. Blocky, neat, not showy. "Thank you. This is worth more than money." That was it. No name, no date, no signature. Just that. I folded it up again, tight and precise, and pulled out my wallet. Slipped the note behind the photo of my crew, Station 14, ladder truck, all of us covered in soot from a night that nearly broke us. That's where I keep the reminders I respect. Not trophies, not permission slips, just the words that still carry weight when the world gets loud. I climbed into the truck, started the engine, and let the heater groan to life. Raina settled in next to me, pulled her seatbelt on, and looked straight ahead. "What now?" she asked. I gave her the real answer. Now we build something that doesn't need translation. The email came in just after sunrise. Not from a firm. No headers, no CCS, no layered titles. Just a clean line from Leonard's personal address and a subject line that said, "Winter plan, approved." He was funding the full ask, 10 beds, the case manager's first 6 months, supplies. No strings, just one line at the bottom that read, "Condition, keep your values." I drove back to West Groves that afternoon. Same route, same iron gates, same hedges, but the tension was gone. No suit, just jeans, work boots, and the same hoodie I wore during cold nights at the shelter. I walked in the front door and didn't feel like a trespasser this time. The butler led me through with a nod and no script. The table was set with nothing but a single item on the far end. One item, centered and intentional. The challenge coin from last night, polished now, resting in the exact spot where Leonard had first taken my measure. He walked in a minute later, not dressed for war this time. Just slacks, buttoned down, sleeves rolled up like the man he might have been before the legend got written. He handed me my parka, freshly cleaned. I took it, ran my fingers along the inside hem out of habit, and stopped. There, stitched into the lining near the ribs, was a tag I hadn't added. Small, dark thread on dark fabric. Ashford Foundation. Tiny. Plain. I looked up at him. He didn't say anything about it. I grinned despite myself. Then he picked up the coin and slid it across the table to me. "Not a trophy," he said. "A reminder." I nodded once, then he sat opposite me and rested both hands flat. "We're courting a donor," he said. "The kind who plays rough. Throws big money, but likes to pick his enemies. If he asks you to call out a competing shelter as mismanaged, maybe to push his check our way, what do you say?" I didn't need time to answer. "I say no," I told him. "I'll talk about what we're building. What we've earned. But I'm not burning someone else's building just to make ours look shiny." He held my gaze without a flicker, a single, final nod. "Good. We'll pass on him then." A few minutes later, Raina stepped in. Hoodie, ponytail, no clipboard, no practice tone. She said hi to the office manager without hesitating, then turned to me and asked, "What bleach mix do you guys use for the shower floors?" I looked at her, heart steady, pulse easy. 1 part bleach to 9 parts hot water. Gloves always, and no half jobs. She gave a small nod. Got it. It wasn't a big moment. That's why it landed. Leonard lingered in the doorway, watching her move without needing to be seen. Then his hand touched the edge of the table near the coin. "I wore a uniform before the suits," he said, almost to himself. "Army." Long time ago I didn't reply. I waited. "Took me too long to learn the right tests," he added. I took the coin, slid it into my pocket beside the folded note from the night before. That pocket had space for the things that mattered, things that didn't need to be posted or applauded. My phone buzzed, Captain again, asking if we could reroute surplus blankets to the church lot tonight. I texted back yes, and added we now had the funds for 10 more cots. Leonard saw me answer and didn't ask what it was. He already knew. I turned to leave, buttoned the parka halfway up, and took one last glance at the long table behind me. It looked the same. Polished, expensive, formal. But last night, the man at the head had been dressed like he had nothing, and he still ran the room. Today I walked away with a coin, a clean deal, and my spine intact. I'm not richer in the way people mean. I'm better off in the way that keeps you steady when the room turns hot, when power starts testing people instead of protecting them. Because when it counted, I kept a man from freezing, told the truth under a roof built on performance, and didn't sell anyone out for a plate of approval. And that's enough for me. If approval asked you to hide your values, would you? Comment, good, or your take. Please like and subscribe. One click helps us a ton.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.